It started with a tiny thing that felt huge, the kind of detail your brain latches onto and refuses to let go. Her phone lighting up. A brief smile that belonged to someone else. The way she shifted the screen just enough that I couldn't see. Those are small moments that stack. By the time she told me she had plans, I already felt like I had been pushed to the edge of a cliff. Except she kept pretending there was nothing wrong with standing so close to the fall. When I asked who the plans were with, and she said, "My ex." Like it was the most natural answer in the world. Something inside me didn't crack, it hardened. She followed that with, "It's just dinner with my ex, stop overreacting." And the casual cruelty of those words lodged itself in me. It wasn't the sentence alone. It was how she threw it at me, like I was the unreasonable one. Like my concern was a nuisance rather than a boundary worth respecting. Instead of exploding, I watched her. I catalogued details the way a detective catalogues clues, the outfit she chose, the perfume she wore, the way she touched her hair when she thought no one was looking. She left with a smile that belonged to someone I didn't recognize anymore. That night I did something she never expected, nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. I didn't follow her. I didn't wait at the restaurant. I didn't text 1,000 accusations or beg her to explain. I stayed home. And that was my first move. Silence is powerful, especially when it comes from someone who's usually vocal. She went out and returned with confidence intact. Or so she thought, humming like she'd gotten away with something clever. She tossed the phone face down. Breezy. Practiced. When I asked how dinner went, she gave me the neatest lie possible. Fine. Nothing to worry about. The ease of it made my skin crawl. What changed everything wasn't outrage. It was proof. You can suspect. You can feel. You can be haunted by doubts. But when you hold the evidence in your hand, the world resets. I started with the simplest tool available, observation. Her social media was public enough that I could see likes and tags. The restaurant had an active Instagram with stories. In 20 minutes, I pieced together the puzzle, a tagged story with 2 shadows, an angle that showed them sitting closer than friends do. His arm relaxed like it had a right to be there. The photo wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The image confirmed what my gut had been screaming. And it changed my strategy. I didn't want drama. I wanted dignity. I wanted consequences that matched the disrespect. Not a scene that would let her paint me as the angry, controlling partner. So I reasserted control quietly. I removed my name from the joint account's auto-payments and set up an account she couldn't access. I called the travel agency and suspended the weekend getaway I'd planned. Because if she could betray me during the planning stages, what else was she willing to betray? I called a lawyer for advice, not to rush into divorce papers, but to understand my rights and options. That step was for me. Knowledge makes the unknown less terrifying. Then I sat down and wrote nothing. I didn't post. I didn't rant into the void. I became deliberately boring to her. I made my life steady, predictable, and emotionally distant in ways that cut through her confidence. Once the silence settled, she noticed. The first message was casual, then curious, then panicked. "Where are you? Are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" The tone shifted like a weather pattern. She called twice and left a voice message that sounded rehearsed. I just wanted to check in. I didn't answer. I let her unravel from the inside instead of shaking the unraveling from the outside. There's a particular kind of terror that comes when someone realizes the person they've taken for granted might walk away. It's the fear of losing the comfortable net you've been stepping on for years. When I finally spoke to her, it was not to yell or to beg. I asked direct questions and I showed her what I had. The photo, the tagged story, the receipts, not to humiliate her publicly, but to remove her plausible deniability. Watching the confidence drop from her face was not satisfying in a childish way. It was clarifying. She had built a narrative where I was the problem simply because I cared enough to ask questions. The moment that narrative fell apart, she had to confront the reality she'd been avoiding. Her stammering explanations were a mosaic of defensiveness, blame, and fragments of admission. I listened, not because I wanted to be convinced, but because I needed to hear everything so I could decide what to do next. Then I moved from reaction to boundary. I told her I wouldn't tolerate being made to feel small or crazy for having instincts about our relationship. I moved out of the bedroom and slept on the couch for a week. It was underplayed, a practical choice, not a performance. I started to say no to things I had previously smiled through. No to late-night calls when she said she was with friends. No to excuses for her sudden disappearances. I set clear, non-negotiable behaviors, Transparency with phones and messages. No private meetings with exes without prior discussion. And honest communication. The rules weren't there to trap her. They were there to protect myself. If she wanted to rebuild trust, there had to be accountability. If she refused, then the life we had built together could not pretend to survive on flimsy apologies. She tried a mix of tactics. There were tears, of course, dramatic, sudden, and convenient. There were promises, whispered at midnight with hands that trembled, pledges to never do it again and to prove her commitment. There was theater, frantic affection in public and long, sincere-looking apologies in private. But the difference between desperation and genuine change is time and consistency. I watched for patterns. Promises mean nothing without new behavior stitched into the fabric of daily life. So I tracked. Not obsessively, not vindicatively, but practically. Did she answer when she said she would? Did she respond with transparency about plans? Did she take steps to repair what she broke? Little things mattered, showing up on time, not deleting messages, inviting me into conversations with friends she used to hide. Every small compliance was a tile in the mosaic of possible reconciliation. During all this, I took care of me. I started running again, a habit I had dropped years ago. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months. I read books that filled my head with ideas that weren't about betrayal or revenge. Rediscovering parts of myself reminded me that I was more than a reaction to her actions. I began dating the idea of being alone, not as a punishment, but as a possibility. That shift was dangerous for her, and I did it on purpose. People who take advantage are often propped up by the assumption that you'll always be there. When that assumption is removed, they're faced with a reality that forces reflection or panic. There were moments of weakness. Of course, I had nights where anger flooded me like a tide and I wanted to burn every reminder of what happened. I had afternoons where I missed the good parts of us, the laughter and the small rituals that had once felt like bedrock. But those memories didn't justify her choices, and indulging in rancor would only feed the cycle. Instead, I used those moments to sharpen my resolve. I wrote letters I never sent, which helped me organize my thoughts and decide what I would and wouldn't accept. Writing was a quiet crucible where I could temper my emotions into clarity. As days turned into weeks, she realized that apologies were not enough. The confidence she wore like armor began to crack into something more human, regret. Yes, but also the dawning comprehension that she had been cruel in a way she denied. She apologized in front of my family, then privately, then in long texts at 3 a.m. Mostly, the apologies began to feel like attempts to repair an image rather than an admission of pain caused. I reminded her gently but plainly that the problem wasn't a single dinner. The problem was the pattern of dismissing my feelings, the habit of prioritizing her desires over our shared commitments. I did not seek revenge in the sense of humiliation or public shaming. My revenge, if you can call it that, was to show myself that I could walk away from a relationship that didn't meet my standards of respect, and to do it with grace. I reclaimed my time, my finances, and my dignity. I made choices that were irreversible in small ways, a new lease on an apartment in my name, new financial separations, boundaries that I would not cross for anyone. Those moves weren't meant to punish her. They were meant to ensure that I would be okay regardless of her choices. That knowledge is powerful beyond measure. Eventually, she asked for a second chance in the only honest way she had left, by quietly doing the work rather than announcing it. She started attending counseling, invited me to a few sessions, and agreed to some of the transparency measures we had discussed. Trust began its slow, uncertain repair, but it was never the same. Trust once broken is like porcelain mended with visible seams. It can be beautiful, but the cracks remain part of the story. I paid attention to the seams. I measured sincerity by action, not by tear-streaked monologues or eloquent promises. Through all of this, I learned that confidence can be weaponized. When someone uses your love as leverage and then mocks your reaction, they're betting on your inertia. My response, calm, calculated, and centered on self-respect, did what anger could not. It removed the safety nets she relied on and forced her to face the reality of the hurt she caused. And that is the hardest thing for someone who is used to walking on the emotional high ground, realizing you no longer have control. If there's a lesson in this that I'd pass to anyone who's been in my shoes, it's simple: strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and boring. It is the patience to collect evidence instead of gaslighting yourself into silence. It is the wisdom to protect your future instead of performing for the present. It is the courage to say no to a life that diminishes you. It's not about exacting punishment. It's about refusing to be diminished again. Months later, we are in a different place, not healed, not forgotten, but honest. She knows what it costs to be careless with someone's heart. I know what it costs to stand up for myself without losing my humanity. Whether we stay together or not is no longer a question I let fear answer. The point is this: when someone says, "Stop overreacting," and you know in your bones that you're not, your response should be calibrated to protect what matters most, your self-respect. That's the kind of response that shatters false confidence and builds something stronger in its place.